In 1926, a man with one of the highest IQs in history died broke and alone. Why? Because intelligence is actually a trap if you don't have this one specific trait.
It really is. I mean, we always assume raw brain power is the ultimate advantage, but it can totally backfire.
Right. If you're obsessed with the why behind human success, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and turn on that bell to join the Insight Lab.
Yeah, you definitely want to stick around for this one.
Because we drop deep dives like this every week to help you outsmart the average. Now let's get into the data.
Let's do it.
Most people think hard work is the answer. It's not. And today we're breaking down the intelligence paradox and why your brain might actually be your own worst enemy.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you think the answer to a massive crisis is just to, white-knuckle your way through it with sheer willpower, you're setting yourself up for an inevitable crash.
Right, because it's not about being tough.
Exactly. It's a problem of biology. Without a system in place, millions of years of evolution have literally designed your nervous system to react to, say, a terrifying email from your boss the exact same way it reacts to a physical predator.
Wow. So the brain it doesn't know the difference between a looming deadline and a literal tiger jumping out of the bushes.
Spot on. I mean, when that crisis hits, your amygdala, that tiny alarm bell in your brain, just starts screaming. It floods your bloodstream with stress hormones.
And that shuts down the logical part of the brain, right?
Right. It actively suppresses the prefrontal cortex. Your body is physically preparing you to fight, flee, or freeze. So trying to use grit is basically trying to out-willpower a chemical flood.
Which is impossible.
Right.
It's like trying to do complex calculus while a fire alarm is blaring right in your ear.
That is a perfect way to describe it. You just can't grit your way out of a biological hijack.
So what do the ultra-successfuls do? Because they seem to get, calmer under pressure.
Well, they use a concept known in neuroscience as cognitive decoupling, basically separating the objective reality of the crisis from the subjective panic your biology is trying to force on you.
Oh, cognitive decoupling. That makes me think of driving a manual transmission car.
Okay, how so?
Like when you press the clutch pedal, you're literally decoupling the engine from the wheels. The engine might still be revving incredibly high, making a ton of noise, but the car itself isn't lurching forward.
Yes. That is a brilliant visualization. Cognitive decoupling is the mental clutch.
So if we're trying to press that mental clutch, what's usually revving the engine in the first place? It seems like the trigger for all this panic is just the concept of risk.
Risk is absolutely the trigger. And that brings us to the first major shift in how the 1% operate. They fundamentally redefine how they measure a dangerous decision. They don't look for safe bets. They look for asymmetric risk.
Wait, I need to challenge that a bit. Isn't risk inherently a bad thing? I mean, our survival instincts tell us to find the safe path. Why would anyone actively seek out risk when they're already panicking?
Because there's no such thing as a completely risk-free path, especially when you're trying to build something big. The fatal flaw is how the average brain calculates that risk.
Like focusing on the probability of failing.
Exactly. Most people look at a decision and say, well, there's an 80% chance this goes wrong, and the amygdala fires, they freeze, and they retreat.
Because 80% sounds like a guaranteed disaster.
Right. But high performers, they shift their focus entirely to the consequence of failing versus the magnitude of winning. They ask, if I'm wrong, is it fatal? But if I'm right, does it return 10 times my investment?
Oh, that sounds exactly like venture capitalism.
It's the exact same model.
Yeah, because a VC knows, out of 10 startups, 8 are going to fail completely. But they only invest when the downside is strictly capped. They can only lose their initial capital, but the upside is unlimited.
Precisely. The 2 companies that actually succeed will pay for the 8 failures 100 times over. That is asymmetric risk.
Okay, I follow the logic on a whiteboard, but how do you actually convince your brain to accept that in the moment? My amygdala still hates losing.
This is where the regret minimization framework comes in. When you're in a high-pressure situation, the immediate fear is overwhelming. So you force your brain to artificially fast-forward time.
Oh, so you pull yourself out of the present moment.
Yeah. You ask yourself, if I'm 80 years old, sitting in my rocking chair, will I deeply regret not taking this leap?
Wow. You're basically using one emotion to fight another. The fear of long-term regret versus the fear of immediate failure.
Exactly. It shrinks the pressure of the moment and engages the prefrontal cortex. You just use the clutch.
Okay, so minimizing regret gets us to take the jump. But once we're in free fall, How do leaders process the immediate problem without reverting back to panic?
Well, they have to avoid what researchers call the analogy trap. In everyday life, we make decisions based on what's happened before.
Right, we just copy and paste past solutions.
Because the brain is lazy, it wants to conserve calories. But in a high-stakes crisis, analogies become a massive liability because true crises are usually entirely new situations.
And when the old solution fails, you panic.
Exactly. So instead of analogies, the 1% use first principles thinking.
Stripping away the assumptions and just looking at the raw facts.
Yes, looking only at the physics of the situation. Building a brand new solution from the ground up based on undeniable truths.
You know, the source material uses a really grounded comparison for this cooking.
Oh yeah, the recipe analogy.
Right. If you're reasoning by analogy, you're a cook following a recipe. If the oven breaks or you run out of flour, the analogy fails, and you're completely stuck, you panic.
But if you're reasoning from first principles, you aren't just a cook, you're a master chef.
Exactly. A chef understands the fundamental chemistry of the ingredients. They know how heat affects protein at a molecular level. Once you know those fundamental truths, you don't even need a recipe.
You can open a fridge full of random ingredients and cook something entirely new, because the fundamentals of heat and flavor never change.
That is so practical. But wait, there is still a hidden biological conflict here. We can talk about asymmetric risk and first principles, but when that terrifying email lands, my heart rate still spikes.
It does.
My palms still get sweaty. So are you telling me the difference between a panicked novice and a seasoned CEO is just like ignoring the physical symptoms?
Not ignoring them. Managing the window of time they exist in. This is the real secret. It's the 2-minute emotional firewall.
Okay, what is that?
Well, high performers aren't immune to the physical stress response. When a crisis hits, they get flooded with adrenaline just like we do.
So being cold-blooded is a total myth.
100% myth. But here's the biological reality, a raw spike of adrenaline, that initial chemical rush that makes you want to throw your computer out the window. It only lasts for about 90 seconds in the bloodstream.
Wait, really? Just a minute and a half?
Just 90 seconds. If you don't actively feed the emotion with more panic thoughts, the raw chemical rush naturally flushes out of your system in under 2 minutes.
Oh my God. So the difference between success and failure is literally just looking at a clock and waiting for the chemicals to clear.
I mean, it sounds almost too simple to be true, but yes. High performers create a strict no-decision zone during that window.
The emotional firewall.
Exactly. They acknowledge they've essentially been drugged by their own biology. You wouldn't make a career-defining decision after downing 4 shots of espresso, so why make one while high on cortisol and adrenaline?
That makes so much sense. They just sit still, breathe, and wait for the prefrontal cortex to come back online.
Yes. They wait, they stabilize, and then they isolate the first principles.
I love how tangible this is. It's not about lacking fear. It's just putting that fear in a 90-second waiting room.
Yeah.
So if we want to turn this into a framework our listeners can use tomorrow, let's call it the Insight Lab Protocol.
I like it. A 3-step mental check.
Step 1. Establish the emotional firewall. When the crisis hits, do absolutely nothing for 2 minutes. Buy time. Drink some water. Just let the 90 seconds of adrenaline pass.
Step 2. Apply first principles. Break the problem down to undeniable facts. Don't guess. Don't use analogies. Just look at the actual physics of the situation.
And step 3. Filter for asymmetric risk and minimize regret. Ask your 80-year-old self if playing it safe is the right move.
That protocol alone will stop you from freezing under pressure.
It's a brilliantly simple system. But, before we wrap up, there's a provocative thought here that I really want our listeners to chew on.
Oh, where are we going with this?
Well, we just established that high-stakes decision-making requires us to, completely override our base biology, right?
Yeah.
Sitting in that 90-second adrenaline dump.
Right, it takes discipline.
But how much of our ability to actually use this Insight Lab protocol is dictated by the automatic habits we do when we aren't in a crisis?
You're talking about our daily low-stakes routines?
Exactly. Think about it. If your default habit every morning is to wake up, grab your phone, and instantly react to every notification and news alert, you're literally training your brain to skip the emotional firewall.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're strengthening the neural pathways for immediate knee-jerk reactions.
Right. If you spend 99% of your life reacting instantly to microstressors, you can't expect to magically master cognitive decoupling when a massive crisis hits. You haven't built the mental infrastructure to wait those 2 minutes.
That's incredibly true. The daily habits are the training ground for the cognitive clutch. You have to audit how often you let yourself react impulsively on a normal Tuesday.
And that is exactly the thought I want to leave you with today. Are your daily, automatic habits quietly sabotaging your brain's ability to build an emotional firewall?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It really is. But if you realized your IQ is a trap, you're only halfway there. Because the way you sleep actually determines if you can use that IQ at all. Watch our breakdown on the billionaire sleep myth right here to complete the puzzle.
You definitely want to check that one out.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Insight Lab, and we will catch you in the next one.